Hello everyone, I am the storyteller, and I am here to help you. Today I know you use this video to fall asleep, so before that, like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also, where are you from, and what time are you watching? Now get comfortable and relax. When I turned 18, I was forced to enter a sick competition called the Ultimate Golden Child. I'm still not over it. They called it the Crucible. It happened once a year in the middle of summer, and if we were 18 when the big day rolled around, anybody old enough to collect a pension could volunteer us to take part. For any reason, this one guy, Mr. Bowditch, ran a window cleaning business. The arthritis in his left knee meant he couldn't scramble up ladders anymore. So the morning after last year's contest, he tossed a bucket at me, the first 17-year-old who crossed his path, and told me I was his unpaid assistant. "And if you don't make those windows sparkle," he said with a shit-eating grin, "I'll nominate you for next year's Crucible." The contestants' bodies weren't even cold yet. Every day after school, I served as his lackey. I didn't complain, though, just counted down the seconds until I didn't need to listen to any more rants about my snowflake generation. The morning of my 18th Crucible rolled around fast. I was in Crawford's Bay, an ugly seaside town, washing the third-story window of the courthouse. All nominations needed to be in before sundown, so I figured if I brown-nosed for another few hours, I'd be in the clear. But then, at the foot of my ladder, somebody cleared their throat. A city official was down there with a civic regalia trailing from his neck, complete with jewels and a gold chain. Gotta look fancy when you're throwing a wet blanket on a teenager's future, I guess. I considered jumping. A snapped neck would have been a much easier way to go. But what if I only broke a leg? There wasn't a doctor's note in the world that could have excused me from the night's festivities. I slid down the ladder. On the far side of the street, Mr. Bowditch glanced up from his newspaper. The official said, "How are you, Jonathan? Still snapping pictures? Listen, I've got a spot of bad news. You've been nominated as a runner." He handed me my summons, marked with the island's coat of arms. "Report to Crawford's Tower at 9:30 for registration, and don't bring any food, water, or anything that could be used as a weapon. Any questions?" I swallowed a gulp. "Who's my sponsor?" "Maurice Donovan." Shit. People said the old farmer built up his monstrous thighs by carrying a calf around the island's outer edge, a distance of more than 8 kilometers, once a day until it reached full size. Plus, he was a neurosurgeon with that shotgun. But I hardly know the guy. What's his beef with me? Ignoring my question, the official marked my name off his clipboard and marched off. "Hey, did I say you could stop for lunch?" Mr. Bowditch yelled as he hurried over, forehead veins ready to explode. "Get back up there, or I'll nominate you for the Crucible so fast it'll make your head spin. I've already been nominated." "Oh," he glanced at his watch. "Well, the ceremony doesn't start for another 10 hours. We've got 5 more jobs to do today. Come on, chop chop." Despite everything, I found myself laughing. I needed to go see whether my friends got their tickets punched. My rubber gloves came off with a satisfying thwap. "Mr. Bowditch, you can lick my plums." His reaction? Absolute gold. If only I'd had my camera. On my way through town, dozens of 18-year-olds from my school flew past, eagerly helping the elderly cross the street or juggling their shopping bags. Another few hours and they'd be in the clear. A ferry departed for the mainland twice a day, but leaving was forbidden until after you'd been 18 on the night of a Crucible, and the locals took any attempt to escape personally, very personally. The bay had one supermarket, one bookstore, and one cafe, which is where I spied Mrs. Donovan gabbing with Miriam Brown. Fate was tossing me a lifeline. Miriam made me photograph her retirement party. I got paid in exposure. Maybe if she vouched for me, Mrs. Donovan would pass that on to Mr. Donovan, and he'd revoke my nomination. Immediately, I regretted that plums line. Hopefully, my former employer would be too busy finding his next servant to notice I wormed my way out of harm's way. Inside the cafe, I pretended to notice the pair as I joined the queue. In an artificially sweet voice, I said, "Morning, Miriam. You're looking wonderful today." She looked like a melted walnut. "Aren't you gonna introduce me to your young fry?" Wait, is that Mrs. Donovan? Mrs. Donovan, did you do something new with your... Save it, she snapped. I know what your game is, but Maurice nominated you, and that's that. My hands balled into fists. Of course, I'm just curious if he knows about my volunteer work. Last week I even photographed. He knows all about your bootlicking. It doesn't make a blind bit of difference. But then why nominate me? Irritated, she said, let me tell you something. In our day, we didn't throw tantrums about the Crucible, and the rules were a lot tougher back then. None of this Head Start nonsense. You're 18 now, Jonathan. Try acting like it. I left without saying bye. On the far side of town, Crawford's Tower's lantern top stuck up into the gray sky, looming over the other buildings. The next time the bell chimed, it would mark the beginning of open season. Approaching the tower's base, I saw construction workers assembling game stalls, burger stands, and bumper cars. A kind of electricity filled the air. Because the bay remained a neutral zone, the island's 1,000-plus residents celebrated there until dawn. On the concrete steps leading to the tower, my friend Jilly sat with her knees hugged into her chest. She'd campaigned there daily for 2 years, distributing flyers about ending the Crucible, going so far as to create a whole newsletter on the subject. Unfortunately, if you raised any objections, most adults got pissy and said, "We had to go through it. What makes you so special?" Others took it as a chance to share their heroic tales of survival, as if they didn't get lucky by hiding in a septic tank until dawn. To them, empathy was an alien concept. Even after a solid month of sleepless nights, the situation was especially rough for Jilly. She looked incredible with her blonde hair trailing in the wind. I hurried over. She stared up at me, her cheeks wet with tears, a summons in her hand. I almost exploded. She was too pure for this bullshit. I said, "I guess your campaigning pissed off those clowns on the council, huh?" She nodded and pointed at my summons. "Let me guess, Mr. Bowditch. Morris Best." Shit. I sat next to her, neither of us breathing a single word. Just as I worked up the nerve to throw an arm around her shoulder, the final member of our trio, Ray, appeared. "Guess who's got a 12-inch cock and flunked out of being a golden child?" he said, proudly waving his summons. "One of those wrinkly fucks saw on TikTok it was me that left a dead rat in his car and got all salty. Guess they're getting with the times. Us kids called the Crucible the Golden Child Tournament because to survive, you needed to act perfect 24/7. Like me, Ray had straight brown hair and gray eyes, although I stood a head taller. When he saw us sitting there under our personal storm cloud, he said, "Geez, who pissed in your cornflakes? I'm the one who's fucked." We held up our summons. "Oh," he cleared his throat. "Listen, don't sweat it. This is what we trained for, remember? That didn't lift our spirits. We trained, sure, but only as a worst-case scenario, a hypothetical." Ray wedged himself between me and Jilly, scooting us apart with his ass. "Come on now, Johnny, the only thing around here bigger than you is that fucking tower. I've seen you go at a punching bag like it shagged your mom and didn't spoon her afterwards. And Jilly, you're somehow quieter than a church mouse and nastier than a mongoose with a thumb stuck up its ass. So long as we watch each other's backs, this'll be a dawdle." As Ray puffed on his vape, my chest unclenched. Together, our chances of survival increased. Slightly. Did being secretly happy about his nomination make me a shithead? "Oi, can't you read?" Behind us, a walking corpse of a policeman tapped a no-smoking sign. Not wanting any more trouble, Jillian and I scrambled away while Ray made a big performance of stretching out. The policeman's name was Officer Best. He stood nose to nose with Ray and said, "Was I talking to a brick wall, son?" Ray puffed on his vape, inhaling as much smoke as his lungs could hold, and then blew it straight in the officer's face. The old man's sly grin sent a shiver down my spine. When Ray joined us, I reminded him pissing people off might not have been the best idea. He said he'd made so many enemies there was 0 point racking up karma now. After agreeing on a rendezvous point, we each went home to break the news to our parents. The island was shaped like a boomerang, 3 miles long from bottom to top. Outside the bay, there were mostly fields, farmyards, and a scattering of cheap houses linked by a network of dirt roads. Back home, I found my mom in the den watching TV. A talking head news reporter was fear-mongering about an upswing in robberies on the mainland. "Thank goodness that sort of thing doesn't happen here," Mom said, tutting and shaking her head. "Do you know what their problem is? They've got no way to stamp out the agitators. That's why their kids are running wild." I told her about my nomination. Without peeling her eyes away from the screen, she said, "Oh, well, whatever you do, don't hide here. I don't want the carpets getting covered in blood." In my room, I triple-checked the pack I'd prepared weeks earlier. Water bottle, energy bars, hunting knife. I'd never even been in a proper fist fight before. Would I really be able to stab someone? I slipped into bed and pulled the sheets over my head, like when I was little. Maybe this was how my villain arc started. Maybe I'd survive, grow bitter, and spend my days yapping about how our unique customs kept crime rates low and taught those pesky youths proper respect. I got up, changed into a navy tracksuit, and set off. The forecast predicted clear skies, which meant zero cover. All that crisp summer air made me queasy. A quarter-mile from the bay, Jilly paced nervously by a hollow log beside the road. "All set?" she asked, her ponytail glowing against the setting sun. Even in camo gear, she made my heart flutter. "Almost." I grabbed a gift box from my pack. "I was going to give you this tomorrow, but, you know." She unwrapped the box. Inside was the last picture I took of her big sister, Natalie, glancing over her shoulder on the beach. After Nat died 2 crucibles earlier, Jillian started campaigning to have the ritual canceled, despite the fact she knew this would put her on the boomers' radar. As she traced her fingers across the frame, I thought, "Screw this," and went for the hug. She must have liked it because she nested her head against my shoulder. Part of me wanted to stay there, enjoying her warm breath against my neck until the officials came and strung us up on the tower for no showing. But behind me, Ray cleared his throat. We scrambled to make ourselves presentable. We'd ironed out a plan months in advance. A network of caves ran along the north coast, and the elderly had problems getting over the slippery rocks by the entrance. But that meant runners were drawn to the site like insects to a bright light. Ray said, "Let me throw this at you. Why don't we hide at Mr. Donovan's farm?" I said, "Ray, put down the crack pipe for 1 second. He shoots trespassers 365 days a year, and he's got a shell with my name on it." "Exactly. It's the last place anybody would think to look for us. Besides, even if they do, I've got this." He showed us a pistol inside his pack. "Where'd you get that?" Jilly asked. "Who cares? The important question is whether I'm a crack shot, which I am." He made some good points. Runners generally steered clear of that area. Plus, the trees that filled the gaps between the different farmers' land meant plenty of cover. We settled on his plan and stashed our packs inside the hollow log. Then the 3 of us held hands in a triangle. Ray said, "No matter what happens tonight, let's swear whoever survives has to do something with their lives. No sitting around this shithole until we turn into bitter assholes like everyone else. Deal?" "Deal," Jilly and I agreed. She gave my hand an extra squeeze. I squeezed back. Then we set off. Throughout the bay, carnival music filled the air. We marched through the empty streets towards the tower, where a crowd of islanders munched candy apples and tossed rings at glass bottles. The smell of onions sizzling on the grill overpowered the salty ocean air. Anxious 17-year-olds watched us go by. Mr. Bowditch had already sunk his claws into one unlucky blonde boy. Further along, picketers wedged against the barrier waved protest signs above their heads. Mostly kids and teens terrified about the future, but some adults too. Maybe if I'd supported Jillian's campaign instead of scrubbing windows, we'd have made enough progress to get the Crucible canceled. I caught her eye and gestured at her supporters. She forced a smile. On his way toward the steps, Ray clashed shoulders with Officer Best. Luckily, some officials separated the pair before things escalated past a few angry words. My chest unclenched. We needed Ray. While the island's chief minister took attendance, his assistants patted us down and shoved us toward the base of Crawford's tower, where another 21 18-year-olds seemed even gloomier than us. 2 guys and 1 girl were in awful shape, which is a rude thing to say, but it meant we wouldn't be the slowest contenders. Our exchanges of good luck rang a little hollow. Once the light began to die, the minister took his position on a raised platform and tapped a microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, a very pleasant evening to you all, and welcome to the 81st Annual Crucible. A cheer erupted from the crowd. He waited for the rabble to die off, then said, "In just a few minutes, our runners will get an 18-minute head start to escape from the bay. From there, they're free to do whatever it takes to stay alive. Run, hide, or grab whatever weapons they can lay their hands on. The only rule is they must stay away from the town until dawn. Now, can we please have a round of applause for this year's hunters?" He gestured at the top of the tower. Along the balcony surrounding the bells, chasers stood perched like buzzards, armed with chains, bats, and guns. Amidst the sea of liver spots and false teeth, I picked out Mr. Donovan, who wore his white hair short and his beard long. Even in the winter years of his life, his body had so much bulk he could launch a haystack 20 feet in the air without breaking a sweat. His eyes stayed locked on me throughout the minister's speech. What was his problem anyway? When only the thinnest column of light splashed across the top of the tower, the minister said, "Runners, take your positions." We placed a hand against the brick base. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the crowd chanted, 15, 14, 13. My stomach churned in my throat. 7, 6. Between the fear and adrenaline, breathing was already impossible. All that training didn't count for crap. 2, 1. Dong. The terror drowned out everything around me. I was vaguely aware of runners flinging themselves forward in a panic and pouring down the steps so fast some tripped and got trampled. Finally, my brain kicked into gear. Barbs of guilt stabbed me for not helping the injured to their feet. Because we didn't want the hunters to know we were sticking together, Ray, Gilly, and I split up, disappearing into different alleys. I sprinted up the north road, and just when I'd exited the town, that bell chimed again. The hunt had officially begun. I hopped a fence and bolted across a meadow at top speed, guided by the light of the moon. Gilly and Ray were waiting nervously at the log. I'd already held them back. Ray tossed me my pack. I pulled it on and strapped the knife around my waist as fast as I could. An open field lay between us and the forest. We were halfway across, completely exposed, when a snatch of a song got carried along on the breeze. Uptown Girl by Billy Joel. The boomers were coming. A station wagon sped around a bend in the road. Most hunters systematically worked their way across the island on foot, but others drove around, making noise to scare runners out of hiding. "Quick," Ray whispered, hurling himself in a shallow ditch, face down. Gilly and I copied him just as the headlights swung over us. I held my breath until the music trailed off. Ray poked his head up, one hand on his gun. Then he gave the signal. We crawled along on our elbows until we passed through an opening in the brush. We moved slowly in the dark, scrambling up and down rocky slopes, passing through clouds of midges. The forest spat us out at the back of Mr. Donovan's farmyard, where equipment sheds surrounded the main house. We searched for better weapons, but everything was locked up tight. Some sheep in a metal pen went nuts if we got too close, so we ducked behind a rock wall marking the border between farm and forest. It was chest high and roughly the length of a football pitch from the main building. For the next few hours, we scoped out the perimeter, occasionally taking on water. As the night grew colder, there was an occasional burst of distant gunfire, but the violence never seemed to get any closer. This didn't help steady my nerves, though. Every passing minute meant more places had been searched. At 5 a.m., 1 hour from sunrise, Jillian whispered, "I need to pee." "We'll signal if there's any trouble," Ray said. After she disappeared into the forest, the wind eased off and I heard the sound of teeth chattering together. Ray's teeth. This made me smirk. There was a real human underneath all that swagger. "You okay, bro?" I asked, prodding him in the ribs. "Pfft, you think I'd sweat this crap?" He gave me a friendly punch in the arm. "I'm so bored I was gonna start a fire so those wrinkly fucks can come find us. You know, make things interesting." We sat in silence for a moment. Then he said, "So, you and Jilly, huh? Eat a dick." "Oh, come on, you've obviously got it bad for each other. The second this is done, you've got to ask her out." "You think she's got it bad for me? Why do you think I never made a move?" Excited by this idea, I stared at the twinkling stars like a drooling idiot. Until Ray grabbed me by the arm, that is. He dragged me to the ground, signaled quiet, and then pointed up. Peering cautiously over the wall, I spied a set of headlights rolling along the driveway. Mr. Donovan's truck. I dropped below the barrier. What if the farm was the last place he hadn't searched? Maybe he'd slit my throat like one of his pigs for making him work so hard. I told you this was a shitty idea, I hissed. We need to get Jilly. Before I could scramble away, he grabbed me by the arm. He poked his head up again, saying nothing. Once the tension became too much, I whispered, "Well, I think he just came home." Just as I forced myself to peek, a downstairs light flicked on in the house. "He's got no idea we're here," Ray whispered, suddenly excited. "He probably threw his hip out and gave up. All we've got to do is lay low for another hour. Then we're..." The next thing I remember is blood splattering across my face. Ray flopped into the dirt, the back of his skull obliterated. Hands in the air. Officer Best burst from the forest, armed with a pistol. He needed to repeat the instructions 4 more times before they registered with me. He made me step away from the body, then he grabbed Ray's gun, along with a small rectangular device in his back pocket. "Not bad, huh?" he said, holding it up. "I'm not much of a techie, but these new age doodas come in handy." The bastard planted a tracker on Ray when they clashed at the ceremony. "All right, that's personal business out of the way. Now we can get down to brass tacks. Where's the girl?" My legs wouldn't quit shaking. "What girl?" I stammered. "The one with the woke flyers. The council promised to beef up my pension if I take care of her." I clenched my jaw, stepped forward. "Easy now," he said, aiming at my chest. "I've got nothing against you, Johnny. Andy Bowditch offered to buy me a pint if I did you in. But those photos you took at my granddaughter's christening turned out great. So tell me where she's hiding, and I'll let you walk. Better talk fast." He gestured at a light cutting across the field. Mr. Donovan heard the commotion. Shit! If I ran, I was dead. And if I stayed, I was definitely dead. But give up Jilly? No way. Hopefully she'd already made it halfway towards... A shadowy figure crept up on Officer Best, knife glinting in the moonlight. Forcing myself not to look, I managed to say, "You asshole, that was a dirty trick." I needed his attention on me. "Not bad for an old fogey, eh? Why don't you drop the gun? Make it a fair fight." "I'm old, not senile, kid. Last chance. Tell me where she is, or..." Jillian was about to attack when a twig snapped beneath her foot. As the hunter reacted, Jilly leapfrogged onto his back and tried to drive her knife into his throat, but he caught her wrist. They went round in circles. The officer tried getting a shot off, but his bullet missed its target, causing birds in the surrounding trees to take flight. I charged forward and threw my weight into a rugby tackle. Then all 3 of us went down in a tangle of arms and legs. Jilly and I sprung to our feet, ready for action. But we froze once we saw the old man vomiting up blood. The knife handle stuck up from his throat. All the bastard could do was open and shut his mouth. I stood there paralyzed. In less than a minute, I'd watched 2 people bite it. I was about to throw up, but then a branch exploded beside my left ear. That flashlight was attached to Mr. Donovan's shotgun, and he'd reached firing range. Jilly and I scrambled in opposite directions. Part of me considered doubling back, but then I remembered I was the target. At the tree line, I yelled, "Over here, you wrinkly fuck!" It never occurred to me to grab one of the guns. If I stayed where the foliage was thickest, I should have been able to lead Mr. Donovan in circles until sunrise. He had 50 years on me, after all. But in the darkness, I couldn't take 5 steps without sharp branches raking open my arms and legs or snagging my laces. Soon my foot slipped into the knot of an exposed root and my chin hit the ground hard. I struggled to my feet and spat out a mouthful of dirt. When I inhaled, my ribs burned like hot coal and my pack felt like its weight kept doubling every 10 seconds. So I slipped my arms out of the straps and let it fall. The flashlight disappeared and reappeared behind the thicket, drawing closer each time. I couldn't catch my breath. It was like I'd ran a marathon. I dragged myself through a tangle of bushes and put a hand over my mouth. "Where are you, you little shit?" The voice came from right beside me. Heavy footsteps circled my position. As he went, Mr. Donovan rusted hedges with his gun. He knew I was close. I scanned the area. Beyond a ring of trees, a clearing opened up. Maybe if I lured him there, I could take him by surprise. I crouched low and tiptoed along, I'm lucky I did, because seconds later, from that exact spot, Mr. Donovan said, "Enough games! Come out and face me like a man." I reached the clearing and held my back flat against a tree. A rocky slope lay ahead, so steep and dark I couldn't see to the bottom. I took 3 deep breaths and then snapped a twig. Mr. Donovan charged in my direction. I fumbled with my holster. Empty. I patted my pockets. Nothing. What happened to the knife? The farmer burst into the space, stopping short of the ledge. He spun toward me, shotgun raised. I went for the weapon. I only meant to steer the barrel away from my face, but it flew out of Mr. Donovan's powerful hands and tumbled noisily over the ledge. Judging by the sound, it must have been a 30-foot drop. The farmer head-butted me in the nose. I fell backwards, but a low branch held me up. Blood leaked from my nostrils and into my mouth, disgustingly warm. "Well, what do you know?" Mr. Donovan said, his eyes twinkling like Christmas lights. "You actually came out to take your beating. I didn't think you had it in you. I'm almost sorry to have to do this." As he dropped into a boxer's stance, I threw my hands up and screamed, "Wait!" Weirdly, he did. "If you're gonna kill me, at least tell me why first." "Why?" he snorted. "Because why the hell not?" "But you mean I didn't piss you off?" "Nope. You're gonna kill me for no reason. You need a reason? Fine. How about cause when I was your age some bastard came after me and I had to fight? That's the dumbest thing I've ever fucking heard. How is that fair? See, that's the problem with your generation. Always whining. Let me tell you something. The rules were a lot tougher in my day, but did we complain? We did not. And you know what? It toughened us up. Yeah, ever hear of survivor bias? Everyone it didn't toughen up is dead. Enough stalling. Let's get this over with. With the energy of a man half his age, he popped me square in the jaw. It probably would have shut my lights out if I wasn't so pissed. I poured my anger into my attacks, but the farmer hit me with some good shots in return. Were his hands carved from stone? Remembering Ray's training, I switched tactics. Made him bite on some feints, darted in and out of range. Soon he was swinging for the fences, his face strained and pale. Age was catching up on him. Although he never stopped grinning, his last shot might as well have come with a postage stamp. I ducked and countered with an uppercut that put him on Bambi legs. He drunkenly staggered backwards toward the cliff, one finger raised as if to lecture me, his eyes darting about like ping-pong balls. Before he could regain composure, I ran up and gave him a push. Gravity took care of the rest. Judging by the sounds, he hit every jagged rock on his trip down the pit. He screamed, but not for long. I was surprised by how little guilt I felt. I stood over the ditch until rocks got kicked loose, somewhere close. I spun around, ready to fight. Jillian stepped out of the darkness. I rushed over and took her head in my hands. "Where's Mr. Donovan?" she asked. I jabbed a thumb at the ledge. Exhausted and bruised, we fell against the nearest tree. That seemed as good a place as any to wait out the night. I hugged her so tight I felt her heart thrash against mine, both of us sobbing. If any hunters had shown up, we'd have made for easy pickings. We watched the first light come up. Then from way in the distance, Crawford's tower chimed. We'd survived. Hand in hand, we set off for Crawford's Bay, keeping away from the main roads. It wouldn't have been the first time a hunter killed a runner after dawn. We talked openly about our futures now that they lay ahead. On the mainland, I'd find work as a photographer's assistant while Jilly studied journalism. Maybe we'd come back someday and document the violence. And I'd get some intense shots to go with Jilly's Pulitzer-winning article. But one thing was clear. One way or another, we would put a stop to the Crucible. One way or another, the boomers would pay. Thanks for tuning in to today's scary story. If you have a horror, mystery, or haunting story you'd like to share, send it to us at Urban America Horror or email. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a new episode when we upload it. We'll always be here, waiting for your next terrifying story.